I want to ask one more question. So you have a story about a Christmas gift you received, and it has some powerful implications in it. Could you tell us that?
Yeah. You know, when you're in the jungle and the airplane comes and brings mail, you really want real mail. In my case, I'd have given anything for a bag of Snicker bars or something like that. So when we got this package from the church, I'm thinking it's going to be good. So my wife and I excitedly opened this package up, and it was a crazy book of ugly cartoons. And I'm old school with cartoons, you know, the Warner Brothers, Bugs Bunny, and Yosemite Sam and them. But so to get this book of ugly cartoons, Pokemon cartoons, I was actually a little offended. And I'm thinking, good night, you know, of all the things they could send us, why would a supporting church send us this book of ugly cartoons? Well, Kayla says, oh wait, there's a letter. So we read this letter, and in the letter it said, Dear Mike, he said, last year, Bautista, the man from our church, Yanomami, ex-witch doctor from our church, went to their church in the United States. And they said, and while he was speaking, our whole church just totally fell in love with him. And we really, really respect his spiritual insight. So right now, our church is really embroiled in a heavy disagreement where half the church thinks that this cartoon, this game, this Pokemon stuff is harmless, and the other half of us really believe that it's something a little bit off. It's sinister. It's something that we don't need to be playing with. But we've so argued about this issue, but we finally agreed that since we all respected Bautista, we would send this book to you and ask you to show this book to Bautista and ask him what he thinks. And we as a church will abide by what he says. If he says they're harmless, great. If he says, you know, whatever he says, we'll listen to that. That's how much we respect him. So I said, wow, that's a little bit better than just an ugly book.
Yes.
Well, my wife, Kayla, she says, you know, this is the exact cartoon I've been telling you about. And she went on to say that my sister had sent Stephen, our youngest son, he was about 12 or 13 at that time, had sent him a VHS tape of Pokemon cartoons. And he loved them. And he was wanting to watch them all the time. And she said, it really bothers me how he acts after he watches these cartoons. And she'd been after me to actually watch them with him just, you know, to get my impression. Well, I'd never really we're so far removed from anything in the jungle that I had never even heard of Pokemon. Had no idea what it was even about. And actually, to be honest, we're so busy in the jungle, I promptly forgot it. We're busy and there's a lot going on. Well, one day, a couple weeks later, I was in our dining room with Bautista, and we were drinking a cup of coffee. And Kayla remembered the book and ran upstairs and got this book and brought it down and said, here, this book that you need to show to Bautista. So I took the book, and without giving Bautista any type of history at all on why I had the book, about the church, anything, I just randomly flipped it open, and I said, Bautista, what do you think of this? And he looks at it and he says, wow. He said, I haven't seen him for a long time. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. He said, and he gave me a name. And I'm reading the English page, and while Bautista is talking, he's talking Yanomami, I'm reading in English. Bautista cannot read or speak English. So there was no danger that he was reading, you know, whatever. And he gives me a name in Yanomami that's a direct translation of the name under that cartoon picture. I thought, wow. And he says, yeah, he says, a nasty little thing. He says, it always bites and scratches and screeches and claws. And I'm reading the attributes of this little cartoon. It bites and scratches, screeches and claws. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a coincidence. So I flipped to another page and the same thing. And I did that 2 or 3 times, and finally Kayla runs upstairs and gets Stephen. Well, he comes down, and from the look on his face, it was obvious he was not prepared to listen to one thing about his cartoons, because he already figured it out, that what we were doing. And so without saying anything to Stephen, and he was just standing there kind of behind me with Kayla, I flipped the page again and I asked Bautista again. Again, he did the exact thing. The name was exact translation of the name. The attributes were exactly the same. And he did that 2 or 3 times. Now there were some that he did not recognize. And he said, no, I don't recognize this one. But he said these things are everywhere. There's way too many of them that one shaman, one witch doctor, one shabori would have known them all. But he said, the ones I know, I've told you. And it was then that I told him about the church sending that book, and that these were games, that these were things that they showed the children.
Wow.
And he said, wow, he said, that's really interesting. He said, because this particular family of group of demons, of Hekura, are the ones that are used. They are the ones that entice the kids into the spirit world. They are the first contact spirits that are used to get into the minds of the children, to give them an attraction for the spirit world. He said, very, very dangerous for children. So then I told him about the church being so divided, and his comment was, well, God gives some the spirit of this discernment, and many people are more sensitive than other people to God's prodding. But he said, if in your church, if there's something going on like this, and there's a group of believers, and they're bothered in their heart by something they really can't even describe why they're bothered by it, but they're bothered by this. And he said, that's most times could be God's spirit prodding them. And he said, tell your people they need to be more sensitive to listen to others. So we did a report on that story, and videoed Bautista talking and sharing about the thing. I translated it, subtitled it, and sent it back to the church. And then I forget what year, maybe 2009, 2010, I posted it on my Facebook page. That I condensed it down a little bit and posted it on my books page. And I was amazed at the pushback I got, especially from church youth leaders.
Wow.
Were the most vocal of pushing back on that subject. So, and I was quick to tell people, look, I have no axe to grind. I'm not an expert in any of this, but I know enough to listen to an expert. And I felt like Bautista was definitely an expert in what he was sharing. And I told one guy, we were back and forth on the comments section, and I finally said, look, if I see a snake in the trail, I'm going to warn whoever's behind me. Just because that snake is a danger.
Yeah.
Now, if whoever's behind me gets bitten by that snake, it's because they were either ignoring what I was telling them, or they were too slow to get out of the way, or whatever reason they put themselves in harm's way. Right. I said, I'm just trying to say, this to me is a danger. I'd like to warn you. I said, that's my only purpose for sharing this story. I have no axe to grind whatsoever in this whole thing. But anyway, it was just interesting that the pushback was predominantly from youth leaders at churches.
Wow. Thank you. I want to just wrap up our interview with reading for you 2 quotes, and then let you make any closing comments you want in regards to spiritual warfare.
Okay.
The first one was a quote by Duke of Wellington. He said, "In a time of war, it is the worst mistake to underrate your enemy and try to make little war. A great country can have no such thing as a little war."
Amen. Amen.
The second quote is from C.S. Lewis and the Screwtape Letters. "There are 2 equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight.
Yes. My first comment would be to fall back on that verse that we started this whole interview with.
Yes.
That we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places. So the Bible is very open about the spiritual warfare that we're going to be involved in. But my second point would be that people who are going to be taught how to spot counterfeit bills never handle or look at or examine anything to do with the counterfeit bill itself. They only handle and touch and study and get so familiar with the original money that just by touch, just by a brief glance, they can spot a counterfeit bill. And I think that should be our goal in our life. We don't glorify Satan. We don't put him on any kind of a pedestal, but we get close to Christ and we keep our lives so close to Christ that we are so in tune with his mind, with his spirit, and with his mind, that we can spot Satan as a counterfeit that he is. In our minds, sometimes we want to put God here and Satan just a tad bit lower. But you know he's not.
No.
He's not. Because during the time of the crucifixion of Christ, there were so many prophecies that were detailed prophecies that came true on that day of Christ's crucifixion. And even right before his crucifixion, when the Bible mentions he's going to be sold for 30 pieces of silver. Now, if Satan was almost as powerful as God, why didn't he have the priest offer him 35 pieces of silver or 25 pieces of silver? But they offered him 30 pieces of silver. And so God had written that out, and they were going to gamble for his clothing. They were going to do this. They were going to give him sour wine on he was going to say he was thirsty. So much was detailed, and yet Satan could not change one little tiny bit of those prophecies. Every one of them were fulfilled, perfectly fulfilled, which tells me that Satan is nowhere in the same class as our God. We serve an awesome, powerful God, but Satan is a deceiver, and he comes in posing many times as an angel of light like he did with Hustel, or just tries to distract us, but he is a deceiver and a liar from the beginning, and we need to study and get close to and lean into Christ. Everything I've ever tried to share with people about the Yanomama and their shamanism and their shabodis and their in tuneness with the devil is never to try to glorify what they have. It's to show the power and the grace and the beauty and the compassion of our Lord, that he loves us and that he desires to save us, and he's done everything that he can to save us. So that's our hope. That's our hope. Yeah, I'll leave it there.